Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our keynote event for Week Without Driving, how to build world-class multimodal infrastructure. And at the end of the event tonight, we'll be handing out shovels, concrete levelers, and sending you out to the community to go build it. I'm super excited to be able to introduce our speaker tonight, Greg Spotts. Greg Spotts is a national leader in transportation innovation, the former director of Seattle DOT, and West Coast client support leader today since his last role for Arcadis Mobility, helping cities across the West Coast build better infrastructure faster. Under Greg's leadership, Seattle and Los Angeles have reimagined their streetscapes. They've advanced climate-forward mobility solutions and paved the way for more walkable, bikeable, and transit-rich cities, which is Walk and Roll's great vision for Bellingham, and we'll achieve it in the next 18 months, I'm sure. Greg is here tonight to share his lessons and ideas and strategies for how mid-sized cities like Bellingham can take a leap forward and implement the plans we already have on the books, our awesome pedestrian master plan, bike master plan, and a lot of the work that I'm sure many of you have been involved in with the Bellingham plan, our 10-year comprehensive plan. I was aware of Greg and ran into Greg at an event in Seattle a few months ago where transportation leaders from around the state were celebrating the passage of a statewide bill that reduces minimum parking requirements across the state. And the cool thing about that event is that Bellingham didn't need to celebrate because we've already eliminated minimum parking requirements for all uses across the city, which is a really great step forward. We're not talking about minimum parking requirements tonight because we could talk about it forever, but Greg will be talking about some of the other solutions to actually change what the public right-of-way, like what the streets look like and how to do that quickly and effectively. Bellingham has pretty good bike infrastructure. We're really proud of being a bike city. We have Galbraith. We have a really big bike culture ingrained into who we are as a community. And as a city and a community, we're pretty values aligned in helping people get out of their cars, get onto bikes, get outside and be active and do it in a way that helps us tackle our housing affordability crisis and our climate crisis. And one of the biggest issues that we've noticed is that we're building bike infrastructure and we're helping people get bike and walk infrastructure and help people get out of their cars and be more and get around the city in environmentally conscious ways. But there's ways we can do it faster, and that's what we're hoping Greg can speak to us tonight about how to really make this shift, make it better, make it faster, and do it in a way that aligns with a lot of the things that the vast majority of our community agrees with in how to do. So I'll stop speaking and I'll introduce Greg Spotts, our speaker tonight.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. How you guys doing? Hi. All right. You know, I woke up yesterday morning on Whidbey Island. I was visiting a friend. The whole 2.5 years I lived in Seattle, I never got to Whidbey to visit him, and he always came to Seattle to see me. So this time I had, work stuff last week and this tonight, so I thought, all right, I'll go visit him. And I woke up on Whidbey, and he had to get to SeaTac because he was flying out, so we took the 8 a.m. ferry from Mukilteo, and I got to Seattle at 9 a.m. And then I joined this wonderful group ride celebrating 2 of the newly opened projects that I helped initiate in Seattle. So I interacted with a lot of people yesterday, and everybody said to me, "Today's the last nice day of the year." 10 different people told me this, and it was so definitive, and fatalistic, there will be no more nice days. And sure enough, we're listening to the sound of the rain on the roof in the theater here. And this afternoon, I learned a lot about Bellingham. It's probably my 4th or 5th time here. I went to Yale, and I have a college roommate who's from Bellingham. And it sounded so mysterious because we were in Connecticut. We didn't know anything about Washington State. He called it the Ham. He never said that people from here are called Bellinghamsters. I learned that today. That's really interesting. I'm surrounded by Bellinghamsters right now. And anyway, so Farrell was my roommate, and he has a party up here every January at his parents' house, and I've been to 2 of them. So I'm an honorary member of his 12-person friend group from class of 85, Bellingham High or whatever what is the high school called? Okay. So I've been to 2 of those. But this afternoon, we all did a drizzly ride around town, and it was really great to spend about 90 minutes on bike together, seeing some of what's gone in, some of the brand new bike infrastructure, some that's been around longer, and also looked at some places that are that potentially need improvement. And it's very helpful to see that before we started. Let me tell you a little bit about how I came to wind up spending the last 3 years in the Pacific Northwest. I had been working in LA in transportation for like 14 years, starting in 2009. And I worked for Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa for a while. At one point, I was the mayor's lead on the city's interaction with the mega projects in the region. And at one point, I had like an $11 billion portfolio of projects. It was really exciting. I tried to get to $500 million, and then it exploded from there. And I had like 2 kids in school, and I just had never really thought about leaving the state for a job. And I got to number 2 at LA Bureau of Street Services. And over my 10 years at Street Services, I think I was one of the prime movers in making it evolve from like a road maintenance agency to a streets agency that cared about street trees and how people get on and off the bus and the crosswalks. Like I helped install the first 50 high visibility crosswalks in LA back in like 2012. And I aspired to run a large public agency. I just couldn't make it happen in LA. I got passed over twice by Mayor Eric Garcetti, who's a friend of mine, but I just couldn't, my timing was never right. And so my kids left high school early, and I became an empty nester. And I thought, gosh, maybe I should apply to an out-of-state job, and realize this aspiration of running a large, streets or transportation agency. And the first job that I applied for was this Seattle DOT job. I found out about it on LinkedIn. I applied totally cold. I had an interview with the recruiter. There were 87 applicants nationally. The recruiter was like an in-house city employee. So there wasn't a search. No one went and found me and said, you should apply for this job. And then there was a citizen search committee that the mayor impaneled to interview 7 people. And I was selected to be one of those 7. And I couldn't find many statements by newly elected Mayor Bruce Harrell about transportation during the campaign. I scoured YouTube and newspaper articles. But then I started researching the 14 people on the search committee. And it was a who's who of walking, biking, transit, safety, underserved communities. And I was like, what if there's an encoded message in who's on the panel? What if they really want someone who's committed to active transportation and safer streets? So I decided that I would interview for it authentically, from my passions. And that advanced me to the final round of 4 people. And we had they flew us up on I think it was June 30th, 2022. And there was an all-day meeting with different city staff and stakeholders and the mayor's team. It was a grueling, I'm an extrovert, and I was exhausted by the end of it. And at the end, the recruiter said to me, I can't say too much, but everybody thinks you're very qualified. So I took myself out to a $200 sushi dinner. And I was I gotta get it together for tomorrow. I had this thought that that was my cue that I could win it, And I took a walk. I wasn't accustomed to this northern latitude, right? And the sun was streaming in my hotel windows at 5:30 in the morning. I was wide awake. So I went and took a walk at 6:30 in the morning at the waterfront, which has been totally transformed in Seattle. And this was the very beginning stage. I had visited a couple times in 2016, 2018, and 2019. So the first time I went, the viaduct was up and the traffic was running, and it was so noisy and unpleasant down there. And the second time, they turned off the traffic, but the viaduct was still there. And the third time I visited, they were starting to tear it down. So this time, the viaduct was down and the construction was beginning. The construction was just starting to go vertical on these wonderful new amenities. And I'm walking around there, and I'm like, you know, it's a big, big thing for me to like leave my girlfriend, young adult kids, mom and sister, and move up here for this job. And I was like, but the mayor didn't fly me up here to be like wishy-washy about whether or not I actually want it. So I asked myself this question. I was like, do I want to be the steward of these streets? And I decided that in the next half an hour, I needed to make a decision on that, because the way to get the job is to walk in there totally ready to take the job. And as I was walking the waterfront, asking myself this question, this like salt breeze blew in off the Elliott Bay. And I was like, I do want to be the steward of these streets. And so I came up with a closing line for my interview with the mayor. And I used it at the end of the interview. At the end of the interview, he asked if I could say, you could ask me a question now, or you could make a closing statement. And so I said to him, you know, Mayor, if you decided that I'm the best person for this job, it would like totally upend my personal life. But I've decided that if you feel I'm the best person for this job, it's a call into service, and I'm going to answer that call. And he says to me, let's get you out of here before you ruin what was a really good interview. And so that was July 1st, and he called on the 7th. It didn't take long. Like July 4th was a break, and I got the call, accepted the job the next day. And it's been a really, really wonderful adventure, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you some of what that adventure was like and what I learned in the process. Let's go to the next slide. So, you know, the week without driving is very important to me because I actually decided to move to Seattle and leave my car in LA. And I moved to South Lake Union. The other thing that had really interested me in my visits to Seattle previously was how this whole new neighborhood sprung up around Amazon, this like live-work neighborhood. And, you know, they would like half the width of the roadway and create these wonderful pedestrian plazas and, you know, bike infrastructure and landscaping, and they turned alleys into paseos. So I decided to live in that neighborhood, which is a transit-rich neighborhood that has a streetcar and tons of bus lines. And I decided I would leave my car in LA. And literally like the third week I got here, September 2022, was week without driving. And I got to meet Anna Zievarts, who is the sort of, you know, founder of the Week Without Driving movement. She's a very interesting person. I met her on a bike ride. We were exploring bike infrastructure in South Seattle. And it turns out she's like this extremely active person who used to be like a semi-pro bike racer, but she has a vision impairment and she can't get a driver's license. So like, I just hadn't thought of that type of mobility impairment before, like someone who could kick your ass biking up a hill, but just isn't allowed to get a driver's license and is a mom and has to figure out how to do all the parent things without that SUV with like a cargo bike. I thought that was very inspiring. You know, when I was getting ready to move to Seattle, I wondered about like, how am I going to practice my craft because I don't know the neighborhoods. In LA has 99 registered neighborhoods, and in my 14-year career as a city official in LA, I worked in every one of them. I was very proud of that, and I knew the communities and all the diverse different kinds of people and the different aspirations of different neighborhoods, what they wanted to accomplish in their neighborhood. And I thought, like, that's so inherent to how I like to do my work. How do I do that in a city that I don't really know that much about? So I asked the staff to put up a web link where small groups of Seattleites could invite me to walk, bike, or ride transit in their neighborhood and show me what's working and what needs improvement. And the SDOT staff were divided. Half the people thought, this is such a like little bureaucratic moment. Half the people thought nobody's going to want to do that, and the other half thought way too many people are going to want to do that. So like there was basically nobody who thought it was a good idea. Like. And we got 200 applicants, and I did 100 of these community walks, bikes, and transit rides in the first 6 months. And it actually, living in the greater downtown and not bringing a car were the three really critical things that drove the entire, rest of the experience. I ended up selling my car and living car free the entire time. I was SDOT director. I don't think anybody's ever done that. I don't think there's been somebody who ran a top 20 city DOT who didn't have a personal car and didn't have a city car. And I would actually take the bus to visit my crews. And that's like very unusual. Like usually, the big boss has like some big white like pickup truck or Ford Explorer and like shows up, in their car, and it's sort of like a big deal, and there's staff with them. And I would just do spontaneous, unannounced crew visits, on the public bus. And the crews would always tell me, gosh, we usually only see the big boss if there's like a PR thing. And so they all got to know me by name and by face. And it was really cool because at the end of the second month, they gave me this Carhartt jacket with signs and markings on it. And that was the group who like puts in the paint and post bike lanes and stuff. Like signs and markings turned out to be my sort of like shock troops for change. So, they wanted me to wear their badge, like before anybody else got to me, they got me the jacket that said signs and markings. I wore that all winter and I was very proud of it. So these are a couple of the listening tour things. And early on, before I had chosen a place to live, my temporary housing was near the 62 bus. And so I ended up doing this thing on Twitter where I started having meetups along the 62 bus route. I called it the Summer of 62. I'd pick like a bar or restaurant and have these meetups with complete strangers through Twitter. And that one on the right is one of the Summer of 62 meetups. And this guy, where is he? Here, this guy, Luke, became SDOT's social media director like 6 months after that meeting. So that was like a really powerful way to introduce myself to community. It was a time, the autumn of 2022, where we were still in the pandemic. The city was doing 2 days a week in office. And most of the agency heads, when they came in 2 days a week, were interacting with their staff. I think in those 100 listening tours, I was in community more than the entire cabinet for the mayor, the deputy mayors, and the agency heads combined. And that was a very powerful message to send. And part of it was like, you don't have to hire a lobbyist to meet the SDOT director. Like, I'll come out, walk your business, I'll check out your issue. And it was really interesting to present to people like that, you don't have to like fight to get a meeting on the 38th floor of the Seattle Municipal Tower. Like, I spend time on the streets, rain or shine, I'm happy to come to you, no big deal. And that really changed how the agency was perceived. So let's go to the next slide. So what did I learn in this listening tour? Some of the things I learned they hadn't entirely told me in the recruitment process. Seattle had been doing these transportation levies, like a incremental parcel tax, and they kept getting bigger over the years. And the most recent one was called the Levy to Move Seattle. It was enacted in 2015, and it was a 9-year, $930 million. So basically, it was like $105 million a year. And when I got there, we were ending year 7 of the 9-year levy, and we'd only spent half the money. And this was potentially very problematic because the levy was going to expire December of 2024. And now we're talking about, like, as I'm figuring this out, October, November 22. And if we couldn't commit the money and build the projects, the voters were not going to give us another levy. And if that happened, we'd be out $105 million a year in revenue, and I'd have to lay off 130 people out of the 1,100 people at SDOT. So it wasn't really explained to me what I had gotten myself into. And it was a moment where sort of delivery was needed. And it was interesting because that's what everybody told me in these listening tours. They were like, we really like the projects, but the projects take forever. You all set very lengthy deadlines and then you don't meet them. And we'd like you to do more quicker. An interesting thing that happened is the first project that got to my desk to greenlight for construction was completing the bike lane loop around Green Lake. And there was this opportunity to put Jersey barriers on, like concrete barriers, on part of Aurora, State Route 99, and take what was a slip lane and turn that into the bike lane. And I was like, oh, you never get a chance to take part of a state route for active transportation, and I'm going to take it and I'm never going to give it back, And the only reason why this was happening is the city traffic engineer at SDOT had moved to WashDOT. So he designed the project and then he approved the project. This guy, Dong Ho Chang, he was like a legend on Twitter in the late 2010s. And he gave me a tour of some of these projects in 2019. And so people were sending me some letters. Maybe you'll reconsider the project, And one lady was like, people are going to be parking in the parking lot of the park, and my children walk to school. And I thought, gosh, I had just done a walking tour in a community that had no sidewalks. And this lady's community had beautiful sidewalks and street trees and nice crosswalks. And I wrote this, a draft of a reply, and I ran it by my number 2, who had been the interim director, Kristen Simpson. And I was like, can I send this? And she goes, yeah, you should send it. And I wrote, hey, Mrs. Jones, thanks for your input. I'll forward it to the staff. I did want to mention it wouldn't be unusual for Seattleites to use our public streets to get to our wonderful parks and libraries. And we built the project. And when we were building it, a component of it was not available. We were putting down these precast C-curbs as a barrier for the bike lane, and they were delayed in arriving. And so we'd put out these big orange traffic barrels, and we had these little signs that said, don't use the bike lane, it's not open yet. And I asked the staff, I was like, there's only a few more weeks of good weather left. It was right around a time like this, right? Yesterday, last nice day of the year. And I'm like, can't we give these folks a few good weekends to use it before, it gets cold and rainy? And they decided, okay, let's open it. And this spread like wildfire, that we had accelerated delivering the project and given the community access to using it. And people from the business community who are not biking around Green Lake took me aside and they were like, keep doing that. So that was really inspiring and interesting. There was this hunger for SDOT to be more assertive, more decisive, which was aligned with what needed to be done. Next slide, please. So, the waterfront came together while I was SDOT director. The contracts had already been let. There was a special office devoted to it. It's pretty neat. This is the new aquarium addition. It's like a giant tropical fish tank. And this part here has an overhang, like a cantilever, and you can look up and see the bottom of the tank. It's really cool. On top of the building is this overlook walk that connects Pike Place Market up here to the waterfront down here. And then there's a road that people made fun of SDOT that we replaced the viaduct with a mini viaduct. And that's kind of true. It happened well before my time, and it was kind of what was agreed to with WashDOT in 2009. But there were 3 different contractors working here on top of each other. One was building the road, one was building the aquarium, and one was building the overlook walk. And when this opened a year ago, it was there was a Michigan State football game. They were in town playing University of Washington. And the first morning it was open, there were people in Michigan gear all over this thing. And I thought, gosh, when you build to the desire path, everybody knows what to do. You don't need any wayfinding. When you're down here, you see Pike Place Market and you want to go there. When you're up there, you want to go down here. And there was never a convenient and inviting, it was some very sketchy side stairs to do it. So that's something that I'm proud we implemented during my time, but it was really kind of on autopilot when I got there. But it's an example of the big things that can be done, to actually tear down a freeway and create something magical at the waterfront. This is an $800 million program. Okay, next slide. So, although I was doing the listening tour, there was one thing that I knew needed to be done in the very beginning, and that was rethink Vision Zero, our safety program. When I was preparing for the interviews, I watched all the hearings of the Seattle City Council Transportation Committee that had happened in the previous 6 months. And there was a hearing where SDOT presented Vision Zero, and they put up a few graphs about how the number of people killed and seriously injured on Seattle streets was going up. The total number, the number of cyclists, the number of pedestrians. And then the second 2/3 of the presentation was like all these wonderful things that that SDOT was doing that are industry standard treatments. And I thought there was something very discordant about that. Like, if the main indicator is going the wrong way, then shouldn't there be a hypothesis as to why and like what we might do different? So on my first day on the job, I commissioned what I called a top to bottom review of Vision Zero, and said that in 100 days, we'd report back to the public on that. We put out that report in February 2023, and I recommend taking a look at it. It's pretty interesting when an agency takes an inward look and a self-critique. And there were 100 different recommendations, and we kind of pulled up 5 of them. And one was to appoint a chief safety officer for the agency. And there's only 2 positions in this 1,100 person agency that are in the city charter. One is the director, and one is the city traffic engineer. And the city traffic engineer typically was interested in moving traffic, more cars, better, faster throughput. And I appointed the city traffic engineer to be the chief safety officer, and said I was going to give him a raise, and he was accountable to me for the safety outcome. And I was a consultant once with McKinsey for a year. I was in the organization practice. And something I learned in 2008 when I was doing that was aligning responsibility, authority, and accountability. And that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to say there's someone who is the owner of the safety outcome. They have the authority to make the changes because the city traffic engineer is actually legally empowered to do that, and I can hold them accountable. And I think that's going to be a lasting, organizational change. Another thing that we did that I'm really proud of, and I kind of snuck this in because the mayor's a big sports fan. The mayor is a former football star from University of Washington. I think he has the most number of tackles that a linebacker ever had or something like that. So I said we should do a no turn on red zone in the downtown before the Major League Baseball All-Star game, which was like July of 2023. And he liked that. That's one of the only things I had a chance to do that wasn't in the Levy to Move Seattle program. So there was kind of like 2 tracks, right? I was sort of pushing the agency publicly to get better on safety. But most of what I needed to do was accelerate delivery of the Levy to Move Seattle. And that's kind of going to be a theme of my talk, is like, how do you get government to do what it says it's going to do faster, better, cheaper, more boldly? And that was a really interesting sort of adventure. Funny enough, that's what I keep getting asked to do in this career. I don't really know why that is. Like, when I show up, when I'm brought into a new role, no one's ever like looking for a bunch of new ideas. They're always looking for like the promises that were made to get kept. Somehow I get put in the game in the second half when we're behind. And everybody wants me to like sort of be the turnaround artist, the accelerator, getting stuck things unstuck. I'm not sure that I actually was trying to be this guy, but it has become sort of my signature thing, is like actually getting the government to deliver. And it's something I'm very proud of. And I sort of, by the time we got to Christmas time, the 4th month of my tenure, I decided to theme 2023 delivery, fast and flavorful in concert with our values. And everyone at SDOT started having meetings like, what does Greg mean by flavorful? And what I meant was, in order to deliver fast, we don't want to sand off the best parts of the project. Like we want to deliver the holistic benefits that the community wanted, the full spirit of the project. And it really became a call to action that motivated the staff, was this idea of delivery fast and flavorful. And it was weird, like it rippled far beyond that. Like a new council member was elected, and the first time I met her, she goes, "You're the fast and flavorful guy." Like it sort of became like a brand for me and for the agency. And that was really exciting. Let's keep going. Next slide, please. So something that's just really neat about when you have a $900 million program of work, there's a lot of like ADA upgrades that go along with it. You know, there's a lot of sidewalk repairs, new sidewalks, curb bulb outs, you know, pedestrian refuge islands. Like, it was interesting, like, once I got over the idea that I wasn't really, it wasn't the season for new ideas, it was the season to execute. And I gave up like pride of authorship. I'm not gonna be the guy who thought of a bunch of projects, who, you know, reconceptualized the streets. I would be the guy who built it. But in building more of it, so many things happened. Like beyond the goal of the projects had so many components that created a more walkable, bikeable, and transit-friendly Seattle. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is like something I'm so proud of. This is the first Dutch-style protected bike intersection in Washington. And we built this during the time I was here. In my first budget that came out 3 weeks after I arrived, the mayor had cut this project. And I was like, guys, we have to restore it. We have to build this thing. We have to build our first Dutch-style intersection here. I had helped get the plans together for the first one in LA. And my senior deputy director, Francisca Stefan, who ran the design group, she had gotten Santa Monica's first one. So together, her and I have gotten Dutch-style intersections in 3 cities that all got built around the same year. And so we resequenced the project and moved different funding around with a lot of determination. And not only did we make these like really cool islands here where, you know, the cyclists get to move around and make turns that are protected, but this diverter, you know, eliminates those through movements. But another thing I was really passionate about is I was the tree guy in LA. I oversaw the urban forestry group, among others. And I commissioned like a tree inventory, and we had arborists visit 650,000 street trees and build an online map with all the street trees, and we started using tablets to like manage those assets. And one thing I was never able to do in LA is plant a tree inside the curb face. I had been to New York City a bunch of times, and they have these beautiful protected bike lanes. And they do this little end cap treatment. There's like a pedestrian refuge island and then a tree. And the trees, you know, if this is the curb, here's the bike lane, here's the island, and the tree is here. And I so wanted to plant a tree somewhere. And 23,000 lane miles of streets in LA, can I plant one tree inboard of the curb line? And Bureau of Engineering never let me do it. So this project has like 18 trees on these medians. And so I'm like really, really proud that, you know, it's one thing to have like a median that's been there forever because there was a streetcar there and there are trees, but this project not only created that multimodal safe intersection, but also put a bunch of trees into what was just an asphalt desert. And I'm really proud of that. So that's another view of it. And that's actually the building where Apple has their staff. So it's a prominent corner and it takes you right to the Space Needle. Okay, next slide. So we had a program to harden the bike lanes we already had. And this was something I really liked. This is, you know, the famous Rem Koolhaas, you know, Seattle Central Library. And this had been like a paint and post bikeway. And part of the levy program was like replacing in the downtown some of those paint and post bikeways with cast in place islands. It's a very high touch look for like your downtown. And I really, really liked it. This was a project I would like go out and visit every couple days. It went right by our office building. And they had this really cool way of sort of systematizing it. So like they'd like lay it out, put in all the dowels, you know, put a form out, and then the next day they'd pour it. So there was like a team leapfrogging block to block, and it was so much fun seeing it happen. So during my time, like most of the bike lanes in downtown were hardened in this way. And then there was this other thing that happened. This is an interesting lesson in sort of interacting with the bureaucracy. There's a thing they do in Seattle, the council does. It's a little sketchy, called a proviso. And they'll take some item in the budget and put a restriction on it. So the woman who represented South Seattle, which is the historically underserved community, said that 1 million of the bike funds could only be used to harden the paint and post bike lanes in her district. And my bike team resented that meddling. It's interesting because the legal staff told me that the executive can ignore the proviso and not spend the money. The proviso doesn't compel them to do it, but they can either not spend the money and skip it or spend it in the way that it's been prescribed. And I said to the staff, but wouldn't it be awesome to like harden the bike lanes in our historically underserved communities? Like, I would have liked it better if she brought fresh money, but what if this is an opportunity for SDOT to shine? Like, what's not to like about it? And I was like, guys, this could be our first chance to put in Toronto barriers, which is another thing I always wanted to do, which are the little mini Jersey barriers. And so we started this program. We spent like $1 million putting in either precast curb stops that nail in or Toronto barriers. And this became very, very popular. And in the new levy that we enacted in November 2024, we have like an $8 million program to just harden the existing bike lanes of Seattle. And it's something that city staff can do in the winter. You know, signs and markings can't like put thermoplastic down in the winter when it's wet, but you can put concrete in. And so like it's something you can do that doesn't need a design, and we didn't believe it needed community outreach because the space had already been taken. It's just demarcating it in a different way. So it was interesting, like a 2-month process of getting the bike team to stop feeling hurt and start thinking, like, at the end of the day, the public will think SDOT did it. They're not gonna think that, you know, Councilmember Morales made us do it, you know? They don't even know what a proviso is, the public. Like, this is a winner for us. And that was really exciting to see the team, like, jump into that. Next slide, please. Let's talk about quick builds. Let's talk about, you know, fast and cheap and temporary. There's a tension between your like beautiful jumbo project that has taken 2 years to design, and you can like take these 5-way intersections and put huge curb bulb outs in and rationalize them and you know, change the way everybody interacts. Or like that picture you just saw of the protected bike intersection. And then, you know, you're moving utilities underneath the street because you're going to put this stuff on top and we don't want anybody to dig into it. And that's like really meaningful, and there's a great place for that. But there's also a place for just like taking some territory for walking and biking or transit and not spending too much time asking and just making it a fact on the ground and figuring you can come back later and like do it better. And that's kind of a, it's sort of like a tactical urbanism concept, you know, like just sort of like get the community excited, show them what can be done. So like this is some really nice looking work that Signs and Markings did, putting down this kind of cool brick-like pattern and these posts and delineators here, and like creating like, you know, it's sort of like, I guess, a pedestrian refuge. It's sort of like a neck down and narrowing without doing a curb bulb out. One of the benefits of this kind of thing is it doesn't change the drainage. And like drainage always means money. Like drainage means a civil engineer, you know, someone surveying, like checking the grade, putting it in CAD. And this can be done on the back of a napkin. And it's really cool when you have city forces who can build stuff, because it's way cheaper. Like when you're going to contract out the construction, then you need bulletproof plans that aren't going to create a bunch of expensive change orders. But when you're like going to self-implement it, the plans can be much more simplified. So here, this is something that just happened since I left the agency that I think is super cool. They like sent out some interns to like paint some little boxes for the scooter share companies to like stage the scooters in the morning. It's very like, raggedy looking. It's not even a proper paint. It's like the thing that comes before the paint, the mark out. And like all summer, the scooters were better organized in the downtown, and they haven't even yet done them for real. This is like the most temporary of anything I've ever seen. Like as if some kid went, and it probably is some kid. It's some like 19-year-old who's like an urban planning student at UW, and it's actually organizing the public right-of-way pretty nice. Here's right near Pike Place Market. This is a very fancy streetscape in Westlake that was put in like the 90s. And this is sort of like an attempt to take a missing link of bike lane, one block that was missing because everybody was so afraid to touch the streetscape. The people on Blue Sky are making fun of the sacred pavers, like, that SDOT can't touch the sacred pavers from the 90s. So right now, this bike lane gap was closed by planters and a couple of Toronto barriers. And it's exciting that, sometimes that's what it takes to like get something going, and then you figure out how to fund something more permanent later. Next slide, please. We did some really neat activations too. Third Avenue is a complicated and difficult place for Seattle. I've learned that it's also amazing. Like, it's a triple layer cake of infrastructure. The light rail, the transit tunnel is underground. There's a zillion buses running at grade, and they're all zero emissions buses getting energy from overhead wires. So there's actually 3 layers of transportation infrastructure on Third. So where some people see, like boarded up storefronts and public drug use, a transportation nerd is kind of like, this is amazing. Like you can pop out of the subway, out of the light rail, and get on a bus to almost anywhere. You can trade from one bus to the other, and it's really well organized. There's like really nice signage that tells you which bus. I mean, it is, from a transportation network point of view, it's a tremendous asset. And I fought to protect that asset rather than cave into the idea that there are too many buses, and it's the bus's fault, all the social problems that are on Third. But we did an experiment with a property owner, Clay's Properties, who owns the buildings on both sides of this particular block, Third and Virginia. And they hung up all these string lights, and it like dramatically reduced nighttime crime on the block. It's pretty interesting. And they've been renting out the storefronts to like groups of artist collectives who have these really cool things going on. And I thought that was another interesting example of doing something temporary with some public-private partnership as well. Let's go to the next slide. We also did downtown activation in really expensive and interesting ways. This is in Pioneer Square. This is a project that was connecting the waterfront to the rest of the city. This is super cool, like bioswale, curbless street environment with only one lane. These are like references to the piers, the old piers, and the sort of burnt wood that used to be part of the old piers. And this is this really cool kind of paver design that's like a wave. So we did some pretty fancy infrastructure too. I just wanted to show you sort of how both are valid, the temporary work and really careful, urban design that also requires maintenance, requires real maintenance dollars to keep it nice. Next slide, please. I'm almost done. Speeding up the bus. This is something I'm very, very proud of. Our largest project, 2 projects, were these rapid ride, bus rapid transit projects. We have to partner with King County Metro. They need to put a lot of money into turning a numbered bus route into a every 6 minutes rapid ride with limited stops. And there's actually this really cool international website with a hierarchy of all the features that make something bus rapid transit, and you get points for different things. Like you get points for paying off bus, so it doesn't call all door boarding, paying off the bus, bus only lanes, special traffic signals for the bus that take priority over the cars. And one of these is also the center bus boarding island, where the bus gets the fastest flow lane down the center, and the general purpose lane is over here. It's like a totally different deal than the bus trying to weave in and out of traffic. And so this was our first implementation of center bus boarding islands. And the bus needs to have doors on both sides, which is really cool. It was the first time King County Metro had bought that type of bus. There's a kind of cool feature where like they didn't want the driver to open the wrong doors and have people like fall out the bus onto the ground. So there's like this digital handshake that goes on at each stop, and the bus knows which side should open. So the driver just presses the open door button, and the right door's always open, which is really cool. So I'm really proud of that. We opened 2 bus rapid transit lines. We broke ground on a third. 2 of these projects are over $100 million, with 2/3 of that coming from the Federal Transit Administration. SDOT is like a grant-winning machine. Not so much right now, but when the national climate is favorable to walking and biking and transit. We also got a $24 million Safer Streets for All grant to execute some of our Vision Zero strategies, and that money is in jeopardy right now with the new administration, which is really disappointing. So let's go to the next slide. If you want to take away one thing from my talk, just remember this, okay? I joined here, and this is what happened, delivery fast and flavorful. We had 180 project starts in 2.5 years, and I'm so proud of that. This is an article in The Urbanist about this delivery surge, and I went on the public radio, KUOW, in an interview supporting the story, and the journalist said, is that hockey stick graph the deadline effect or the spots effect? And I said it's about half and half. And I'm really proud of it. So you can potentially change, the way that the bureaucracy functions and delivers. The larger projects we contracted out, and throughout the course of the levy, SDOT was awarding 1 construction contract a month. In the first half of 2024, we doubled it to 2 a month, and in the second half, we tripled it to 3 a month. So, things in government don't usually double or triple with the same money. So that's something that I'm really proud of. Let's go to the next slide. And then what we were able to do is we had proved to the voters that we were trustworthy and accountable with their money. And we brought a 20-year all-modal transportation plan to the council, who enacted it in the spring of 2024. And then we brought a $1.5 billion 8-year transportation levy to the council, who put it on the ballot in July of 2024. That was 30% larger after adjusting for inflation than the previous one, and that passed with 66% of the vote. And after that, I was really tired and I wanted to go home to LA. So I stepped down from the job shortly after the election. And I'm very excited to share with you that although I've moved back to LA, I've started working for a global architecture and engineering firm called Arcadis. And I chose Arcadis because they were like, we want you to work your dual city network for us. So I'm spending a week a month in Seattle. So I haven't given up on advancing active transportation in the Puget Sound. And it's in that spirit that brought me up here to speak with you all. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This was super awesome to watch, and just like drooling looking at some of the treatments. Like, we can have rapid ride in Bellingham, right? Like, how do we get that? So can Bellingham have this nice stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. Why not? I mean, first of all, one thing I'll say is something that really inspired me in my time in this job was that Seattle is growing so fast that the only way out is to make the streets more multimodal and create more neighborhoods that are like a 15-minute city. Like when you have a city that's adding 10,000 new residents a year, like 5 to 7,000 new households, if every one of those households brings 2 cars, you know, it's going to be a traffic choke nightmare of a place to live. And so I found it really inspiring that like the only like conceivable way through this growth was to go more multimodal and, you know, reduce carbon emissions at the same time. And Bellingham's not exactly in that situation, but I think, you know, Santa Monica's a really cool example of a 90 to 100,000 person city that has sequentially made the streets more walking, biking, and transit friendly. They have a long way to go, but I raised my kids in Santa Monica. We happened to go to the elementary school that has the highest walk and bike percentage of arrivals of the 9 elementary schools in Santa Monica. The school was in a low-rise but highly dense area of renters. And you know, the streets were crawling with kids. It was so much fun. Kids would band together in groups like a walking school bus. And as they got older, like by the middle of elementary, there were lots of groups of kids meeting up and walking to school without a parent. There were lots of parents dropping their kids off on a cargo bike or biking in separate bikes with their kids. It was really, really inspiring. So I really do think that the sky's the limit if there is a vision and organized advocacy. And you know, I loved being pushed by the advocates in Seattle. I mean, before Elon ruined Twitter, my Twitter following, my monthly views went from 70,000 in LA to 1 million in Seattle. That's how engaged people are. Like people stopped me on the bus and on the street 2 to 3 times a week. Like I became like a urban planning nerd celebrity in town. And that's how much people care about it. And so all of you are part of the answer to like what can happen here. Advocacy really works. And there actually are many of us in the government who need the push, want the push. I remember in LA when I started doing this kind of work, the only people who showed up at the public meeting were the people who didn't want the bike lane. Yeah. And now a lot of people show up who do want it. And one of the things that I worked on a lot, I didn't get a chance to share this with you in the presentation, is how the outreach is done. And I decided that we are not having private meetings with the project opponents. We're going to, when we advance a design from like 30% to 60%, we'll bring it to a public meeting, we'll put it up online 2 days before, and everybody who's interested can comment. But the people who don't want it are going to have to say so in public and make their anti-safety arguments in public, and that some of them didn't like that. Previously, they'd been given sort of the opportunity for a behind-the-scenes break tap before the plans even went to everybody else. So, like, empowering the advocates can be very powerful in bringing things to life.
So for the advocates in the room, because we have many of the advocates, elected leaders, staff in the room, what are the obstacles and how do we help overcome them?
Sure. I mean, there's change. People are always uncomfortable with change. There's removing some parking. And it's interesting, small business owners drive to work and they think all their customers do too. And they don't. And sometimes you can actually do data gathering and prove that. And we've done that in LA sometimes. So there's always like a battle over a handful of parking spaces. Something that I had that was unique in this job, but I think I used it differently than other people have, is this pending crisis if we didn't get the new levy. And so when a couple of like small businesses didn't want the bus lane project because they were going to lose a few parking spaces and they'd go around me to the mayor's office, I'd just be like, to the mayor's office, I'd be like, listen, like, we have to build every one of the projects or the public isn't going to believe in us. We're not going to get our new levy and I'm going to lay off 130 people. So like, what are we even talking about here? And I also, had this sort of, the advocates started to catch on to this, that I had this sort of radical, simple idea that if it's in the capital program, I'm building it. Like, and I used to tell some of the project opponents, like, I'm not living away from my family up here to not build the projects. Like, like I came here to build the projects, and everything I'm building, other than that no turn on red zone, is in the capital program that the mayor and council enacted with the budget. Like, the capital program shouldn't be a set of possibilities. It should be an instruction to deliver to the agency, and the agency head should take it on themselves to deliver it.
Awesome. And then last question for me, and then we'll open it up to the floor. Are there lessons in Seattle or LA that you would caution us not to repeat?
I mean, I would say, you don't want to pick a fight that you're going to lose that will be like a galvanizing moment for the forces of cars.
We won't name a street in Bellingham.
And it, sometimes you get things done because the people who don't want it aren't that well organized. So you want to be a little just like, I mean, I'm an optimist and a believer in positive change. And like, I don't want to pick a fight, lose, and galvanize my opponents in the process. Sometimes you can't help it, but it's worth considering that. Because the goal isn't to sort of, performatively advocate for the right thing. The goal is to get things done. And that's something that I've just tried to think through carefully, in all the jobs that I've had. Because in a way, like, you want to show that government can work for people. So successes bring more successes and bring more momentum.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we'll take 4 or 5 questions from the audience now, and then you're free to grab a drink afterwards, and that'll be our evening. We have a hand right here.
So you have shown us what you have, quantitatively speaking, in that graph, which is amazing. But how? As someone who works in government, I understand deeply how hard it is to have a vision, to have everybody in that bureaucracy follow through on your vision. So what do you think helped you move along and catalyze to that graph, that up point in that graph, where no one else could before you?
Sure. I mean, see if I can come up with 3 different things. One is having some sort of accountability tool for when things don't happen and showing that you notice and that needs to get better. We had this thing called the 3-week look ahead that the Capital Projects Division would put forward the milestones that were expected. Like, Project A is going to publish its 60% design 2 weeks from now. Project B is going to advertise the construction documents for bids on this date. And when those things didn't happen, they just took it off the 3-week look ahead. It just disappeared. And I was like, guys, that's not okay. If it doesn't happen, it goes in red, and we're going to have a meeting to talk about it. And that was a real game changer. And I started emailing the project managers. I never criticized anybody. I never kicked anybody's ass, but I'd be like, hey, I noticed that such and such project has slipped back 2 weeks. Can you let me know why that is? And is there anything I can do to help bring it back to where it was? And so I guess that leads to number 2 is I've always had this sort of approach as a leader and a manager. Bring your problem to me early and I'll help you. Like, don't be afraid to surface a problem. It'll just fester and get worse. So it's sort of like trying to create a safe space to problem solve with the staff, but with the intent that you're gonna like actually up the tempo and make it better. Another thing was, and this was the second way in which I couldn't have authorship. Every time I double clicked into a project, it slowed it down. Because when the director gets involved, everybody gets nervous. So like I kind of wanted to like add some walking and biking elements to some of the projects, and I made a stand on a few of them. But I realized that if I want to move the whole program, then I have to kind of let people do it and not try to be the chief street designer of SDOT. I actually told everybody I'm not the chief street designer of SDOT. The last 2 people they had hired came out of street design units, like 40 people. And I was like, I'm not signing off on the plans. I'm not going to open the plans in CAD. I'm not going to red pen your plans. But I occasionally really wanted to just say, hey, couldn't we make this better by? And then I was like, no, like that's just going to slow down the overall movement of stuff. And then the last thing is, I developed a personal goal that when I interact with one of the staff, I would try to, beyond whatever business we were transacting, increase their commitment to the mission, help them think about their professional growth, and or help them within the team in which they're working, for that team or the system that they're working in to be better. And I challenged myself to hit at least 2 of those. It was very interesting to try to run a parallel process in your mind while you're talking to somebody. How am I also going to increase that engagement, help them professionally grow, or help them work better within their team? And that was a really neat aspiration that I think caused me to have an impact on more people.
Cool. Next question right here in the blue.
Let's see some context into my question. There are a couple places around Bellingham that I learned a new term today. The paint and post things I feel really restrictive. And it could just be me, but I chafe at that. Bikes are so mobile. And looking at the hardening, that feels even more like claustrophobic to me. Were those decisions based on, and also my understanding that it could be decades ago, was that a lot of accidents happen mostly at intersections. So what is the justification for hardening of bike lanes before intersections, which intersections are more hardened because we still need that mobility?
Let's go back to one of those slides and I'll tell you. Keep going. Oh yeah, just go back one. There you go. By the way, I took most of these pictures. I'm like constantly taking pictures of the work and putting it on social, and I feel like that's one way to sell it. So I took a class in bike lane design like 10 years ago, and they introduced this concept of like levels of traffic stress, and that there's like 4 different levels of traffic stress. And people will only use bike lanes if they're comfortable with a level of traffic stress. So this is like a 880 design, like people from 8 years old to 80 feel comfortable here. This is the type of design that a mom will take kids into. And so it isn't actually for the more confident cyclist. It's for the people who aren't as confident and feel more comfortable with more distance between them and the cars and less of a perceived likelihood of the cars intruding. So it's really trying to kind of democratize the biking experience for more people.
So how viable are decreasing the total speeds in the city of Bellingham? So in Bellingham it's 25 miles an hour, except for a couple spots where it's 30. But if you went to 20, or even 15, like a school zone, it drops to 20. If it was 20 everywhere, would that, I'm curious how that would affect confidence.
It would affect it a lot, and something that's been extremely frustrating, but it's not just a Seattle issue, is proactive traffic enforcement has basically stopped in the city of Seattle. There's a shortage of cops. There's so much pressure on the response times. They basically disbanded the traffic unit. They only like get together when like the president's coming to town or something. And so it's really disappointing that we have very low speed limits on arterials in Seattle, but there's not enough enforcement, and every year it seems like reckless driving is getting worse.
stay tuned for a traffic speed study in Bellingham on exactly that issue. So come to the front, and we'll go to the back.
Hey, can we take a selfie real quick for social? I need you all to look enthusiastic. Hey! Okay, thank you. Excellent.
Yeah, you emphasized the Dutch style intersection, and you mentioned that being in Seattle, Los Angeles, and Santa Monica. I'm wondering if you've done any experiments in any of those cities with Dutch style shared streets, which goes a step further than that and has had incredible results in terms of Vision Zero.
Yes, I'm a student of this, the WUNERF, the shared curbless street environment. And I've seen them implemented in Santa Monica. We implemented some in Seattle, and we had one that was profoundly unsuccessful. And I gleaned a very good takeaway from it, which is, and I've visited some in Germany, so I've seen them in different places. If you want to create a shared street where the car is kind of the guest and people are invited to walk and bike across the whole street, and there's no specialty sidewalk area, it has to be a weak desire path for the motorist. You can't make that work if there's a really strong need to get from point A to point B in that place. We did one in Seattle on the street that is a way to get to I-5 in the afternoon. Can't work, you know? So when we did a revision, we put a diverter and made it so you can't go that way anymore. So I think the shared street is very promising, but it has to be where it's not a primary route where the car really wants to be.
Stay tuned for Astor Street in Old Town as we develop that part of town. Question in the back.
So I've been an advocate at the micro level for about 20 years in this town, mostly in neighborhood stuff. And I've served on the Greenways Committee a couple of times, drafted the last couple of levies. My neighborhood has the highest proportion of missing infrastructure projects on our bicycle and pedestrian master plan. It's also one of the poorest and most densely populated neighborhoods.
What's it called?
It's Happy Valley. And something, so my brain just melted in 2020 because the synergy of all these things happened when the city vacated a unimproved right-of-way that had a trail on it. And these little connections, block to block, end up being really critical, especially in a place that doesn't have very good permeability or connection to other trails or sidewalks. And they sold it to a developer who wanted to build it in a parking lot. Yeah, and it was a trail that was on our city maps that our neighborhood had actually built. So it kind of blew my mind and sent me off on a really psychotic tantrum.
How are you doing now?
Not much better. I'll tell you this, and Walk and Roll will testify to that. I did force the city to do a citywide inventory of these things that are called unimproved right-of-ways. And these are any section of town where I just wanted it at my neighborhood level first, and I found out we have 52 of these potential connectors in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
There's 1,257 of them citywide. I suspect that we could get hundreds of them connecting from A to B, little sections. Walk out this door, and maybe it won't be a torrential downpour again. About 50 feet away, there's probably what is a vestigial alleyway.
Yeah.
But it could have connected you to Prospect Street. But it's got fences and gates on it, and I'm sure it's been vacated. So I'm wondering, because one of your slides had greenways in there, I'm wondering about if the city of Seattle had a policy, as Portland does, of protecting these unimproved right-of-ways and reserving them for eventual density and permeability at the neighborhood level.
I don't know the answer to that, but I do remember seeing there were some parks where there's no sidewalk to get you to the park. And in certain cases, SDOT would just put some paint and post down and reclaim part of the asphalt roadway for walking. And sometimes even plant some trees in there. And I thought that was really interesting because it seemed like the traffic engineer's worst nightmare, like somebody just took the roadway and made it for somebody else. And like, who says you can't, you know? And so you raise a really interesting question of like, you know, there are these easements that give the city the right to all these different, you know, pieces of land. And how does the city create a set of authorities and then use those authorities for the purposes of mobility and community connection? And often there's well more that could be done with it than what is done with it. And it's a very interesting area of opportunity.
One more question? In the back?
So in Sacramento, there was recently a victory in California for housing advocates with relaxing CEQA requirements in a way that seemed like really counterintuitive to people who aren't, you know, really in the know about this policy themselves. Is there something in the state of Washington for mobility that might seem counterintuitive that we could advocate for on maybe a larger level, such as the state level, to help us get these questions?
That's a great question. I think one of them would be like, what if like bike projects don't need to go through SEPA anymore? Like what if any kind of like low carbon transportation project doesn't need an environmental? That could be kind of interesting. I also, I think, so there's a restriction in state law here that we don't have in California. And it's designed to make sure that contractors get a lot of work from the government. It's this maximum amount of money that you can spend on a project with city forces before you have to contract it out. It used to be like $90,000, and I think 2 legislative sessions ago they bumped it up to $200,000. It's still way too small. Like cities should be able to do like this type of project without having to contract it out. You know, it's 2 to 3 times more expensive to do a plan set that can be robust enough to be contracted out and deal with all the change orders. So I do think that like pushing that way, way higher would be a way to encourage like a lot more rapid innovation by cities and their staff than this current way where, you know, a tiny little, what is $100,000 today in city government? It's nothing. Like maybe that should be $1 million or 800,000. So like continuously bumping that up would be really good. It is intriguing how on housing policy, the state legislatures in California and Washington keep preempting local control to try to cause the production of more housing, and I find that very inspiring.
Okay, well, I get the last question.
All right, was this helpful? Was this interesting?
So we can go check it out. What is the single project you are most proud of delivering on?
Okay, good. There's a little story about this. So one of the people on the search committee that hired me is Lee Lambert, who runs the Cascade Bike Club. And he's a proud African-American guy running an organization that used to be very white and male and is still diversifying. And we became really good friends right away. Like he invited me to his family Thanksgiving in Shoreline. And he arranged a summit for me and my team to meet with cyclists of color in South Seattle in maybe my second month on the job. Yesterday, the bike lane that opened went by this bar where we met, and I had this sharp memory of it. And what people told me at this meeting was, we don't believe you really want to build these projects in the historically underserved communities. They're always planned, they always have public outreach, and they never get built. And we think you don't actually want to. And we just had a delay on one of them, and it was really powerful to hear that the perception was, that's because you don't really want to do it. And so I knew there were people in SDOT who very, very much wanted to do this and who were really committed to like a more equitable transportation network. So I took all 6 of the South End bike lane projects and grouped them together and called it a director's special. And I had a really terrific executive assistant, and she'd been the EA to the last 3 directors. And I thought, nobody had really given her a chance to like get into the content and perhaps promote out of that. And so I made her my liaison to those 6 projects. And she started meeting with the community, meeting with our staff, and reporting back to me every 2 weeks on these projects. And I transmitted to the staff that a delay on any one of these projects tells the community we don't care. That it had happened too many times and we couldn't afford that. And so we delivered all 6 of them. So there's Georgetown to downtown, Georgetown to South Park, Beacon Hill, MLK, West Marginal, and East Marginal. And I think that will be a very important part of my legacy, is just being determined to prove them wrong. I'm very proud of that.
Thank you.
Thank you all.